to untie it. Then, as usual, Alexander thinks out of the box. He says, it doesn't matter how the knot is loosened. He draws his sword and cuts the Gordian knot. He hacks away at the knot until he opens it up. And then he finds the ends and unties it. Now, some people say this is cheating, but that night a great thunderstorm breaks over Gordium. Alexander believes that Zeus approves.
Some modern-day historians believe Alexander's experience at Gordium reflects his mastery of the art of public relations as much as his religious fervor.
Alexander was a master at the photo op. When there was a time when he could use it for propaganda purposes or for PR purposes, he did it. And he used it primarily to impress his army, but also to impress the people over whom he was to rule.
For Alexander's troops, there has never been a time of higher troop morale. But the most difficult tests are yet to come. Upon leaving Gordium, Alexander heads south when he learns that Persian King Darius is personally leading a massive army towards Issus to halt Alexander's conquest. Darius's troops have been estimated to number 600,000, but most historians agree that 60 to 100,000 is far more likely. Nevertheless, Alexander's troops, 30 to 40,000 strong, are severely outnumbered. Despite the advantage the size of his army provides him, Darius seeks counsel from one of his most trusted generals. Roman historian Curtius Rufus described the encounter.
Persian King Darius turned to Charidemus, who was an experienced soldier, and proceeded to ask whether he was well enough equipped to crush his enemy. Charidemus answered, "Your magnificent army can strike terror into your neighbors. It gleams with purple and gold. The Macedonian lion is certainly coarse and inelegant, but protects behind its shield tough, densely packed soldiers. When they are tired, the earth is their bed, and their sleeping time is of shorter duration than the darkness. What you need is strength like theirs. Send off your gold and silver and hire soldiers." Darius, unable to take the truth, had Charidemus dragged off to execution.
Darius is confident that the Persian army under his personal command will defeat Alexander. But to give himself even greater advantage, Darius makes a strategic move that takes Alexander by surprise. The Macedonians anticipate Darius attacking from the south. Alexander moves his forces south from his Issus base camp to await the Persian army. But then, Alexander receives startling news. Undetected, Darius moves his army north through a mountain pass and captures Issus, severing Alexander's supply lines. Darius is now preparing to attack from the north. Alexander has no choice but to reverse his direction. It is November 333 BC, when Alexander finds his enemy waiting on the opposite bank of the river Pinarus, where it meets the Mediterranean Sea. This is the location today, the shoreline to the west and the hills to the east. Alexander halts his army several hundred yards before the river. Though Darius gave his army a great advantage by cutting off the Macedonians from their supplies, geography is in Alexander's favor. With the sea limiting one flank and the hills the other, there is less chance that the smaller Macedonian army can be completely surrounded by Persian forces. Alexander surveys the situation.
A huge body of men was sighted in the distance. Alexander ordered his men to pitch camp just where they were. He was delighted that the issue would be decided there, in the pass. However, his confidence gave way to worry. Only a single night now separated him from a critical event. While his victory might be in doubt, one thing was quite certain, that he would die an honorable death, which would bring him great praise.
When we consider Alexander in all his battles, one of the things obviously we have to take into account is how did he feel about it? Was he afraid? And to be honest, in just about every case, I see no evidence of any fear whatsoever.
Did he have any fears? He may have had fears. Does he act like he had any fears? No. He is one of the few people that I can say in history that I have examined who acts with supreme confidence.
The lines are drawn for what will be known as the Battle at Issus. Like the Granicus River, the Pinarus now becomes the Persian army's primary defense. Darius aligns infantry and cavalry along the riverbank and in a flanking position at the foothills. Riding in his chariot, Darius takes a central position from where he can observe the action and dispatch orders. Alexander prepares to do what he does best: anticipate, react, and adapt.
Darius believes that his huge force of cavalry will win the battle, so sensibly he places them here, on the flat ground by the Mediterranean seashore. This is Alexander's left wing, where his Macedonian infantry are led by his trusted general Parmenio. But at the last minute, Alexander sees where the Persian blow will fall, so he reinforces this area with his allied cavalry. As Alexander's army advances, hordes of Persian cavalry strike hard. The Macedonian left wing holds, but just barely. An even more serious situation is developing further inland, at the center of the battle.
The troops sent forward into the midst of the Persians were now totally surrounded. Obliged to fight hand to hand, they swiftly drew their swords. Then the blood really flowed. The two lines were so closely interlocked that they were striking each other's weapons with their own and driving their blades into their opponents' faces. Only by bringing down his opponent could each man advance. Exhausted as they were continually being met by a fresh adversary. And the wounded could not retire from the battle as on other occasions because the enemy were bearing down on them in front while their own men were pushing them from behind.
Even Alexander's powerful phalanx is in peril at Issus.
Now the phalanx has one great weakness. This rough ground. In this kind of terrain, it's impossible to keep the ranks level and the files tightly packed. And as the Macedonians stumble across the riverbed, gaps open up in their phalanx. Darius's Greeks tear into the disordered Macedonians, who desperately try and keep their formations together. Here in the center, the Macedonian phalanx is stopped. They're in serious trouble.
The Battle of Issus in November of 333 BC is critical to Alexander's conquest of Asia, but his army is outnumbered by the forces of Persian King Darius. Rough ground hinders the progress of the legendary Macedonian phalanx and infantry, which find themselves engaged in the bloodiest of hand-to-hand combat. The only chance for Macedonian victory lies with the cavalry, led by Alexander himself.
Alexander was as much a soldier as a commander. Riding high in his chariot, Darius cut a conspicuous figure. His brother Oxatheres saw Alexander bearing down on Darius and moved the cavalry under his command right in front of the king's chariot. Then the carnage truly took on cataclysmic proportions. Around Darius' chariot lay his most famous generals who had succumbed to a glorious death before the eyes of their king, and who now all lay where they had been fighting.
Persian King Darius begins to panic, but the battle is far from over. Alexander turns his attention to his bloodied and beaten phalanx and infantry, still bravely trying to hold their ground.
At this point, Alexander alone holds the key to victory or defeat. The usual problem with cavalry is that once you let it go, it's gone. That infantry running away there is a perfect target for cavalry, and just beyond them is the Persian camp with all its loot. But Alexander has sufficient command to stop his cavalry charge, and the control to regroup them, turn them left, and smash into the Persian center. Here, Darius himself is directly attacked by Alexander. Too late, Darius discovers that the Macedonians' strongest force is their cavalry. In the savage fighting that follows, Alexander himself is wounded in the thigh. Darius, as he sees his royal bodyguard being cut to pieces, turns his chariot round and runs for his life. The Persian line folds up, and as evening falls, their retreat becomes a rout.
Following this battle in late 333 BC, Alexander receives word that Darius's mother, wife, and 2 unmarried daughters are among those taken prisoner, and that they wrongly believe that Darius has been killed.
When he heard this, Alexander sent word to them that Darius was not dead, and that they need have no fear of Alexander. He was fighting Darius for the empire of Asia, but they should be provided with everything they had been accustomed to when Darius was king. Alexander allowed them to keep the same attendants and privileges they had previously enjoyed, and even increased their revenues.
And what he's doing is presenting himself as the next Persian king. He is the legitimate Persian king, and it is his duty to take care of the women folk. And by doing that, he's sending out a huge message to the rest of the world that I have the Persian women, I am the Persian king, the Persian nobles are coming over to me.
For Alexander the Great, the victory at Issus in 333 BC is a dramatic turning point. He has defeated the most powerful army in the world, led by the most powerful ruler. Alexander continues his conquest of the Asiatic seaports. Cyprus and Phoenicia come easily under his control. During this time, Alexander receives a letter from Persian king
offered him all the territory west of the Euphrates and the hand of one of his daughters in marriage, and on these terms proposed that they should become friends and allies. Alexander told his companions of this offering, whereupon Parmenius said, I would accept these terms if I were Alexander. So would I, by Zeus, retorted Alexander, if I were Parmenius.
Alexander wrote his reply to Darius. First I defeated your generals. Now I have defeated yourself and the army you led. In the future, let any communication you wish to make with me be addressed to the king of all Asia. Do not write to me as an equal. Everything you possess is now mine. If you wish to dispute your throne, stand and fight for it, and do not run away. Wherever you may hide yourself, be sure I shall seek you out.